Hello, hi, welcome, or welcome back to my channel. Long time no see. um, so, yeah, long time no see. Um, I've not had the energy to do booktube. uh, and that led to me being away from booktube for quite a while. I didn't have much energy for so many things, and so I ended up just kind of like partitioning my energy and put them where on things that I prioritized more. And unfortunately, I just kind of had to put booktube a bit lower on that list. But anyway, tonight I have a little bit of energy, and I think I just want to talk about some of the books that I've read. And because I've been away from booktube for quite a while, I have not been rambling about books that I've read. And as a result, I think I have like about 19 books that are kind of like pending for some rambling treatment. So in this video, I'm just gonna give the, put the shine the spotlight on three of those books, because I only have energy for 3 tonight. And these are the 3 books. Okay, these are the 3 books. And these 3 books are books that I read way back in June 2025. So I'm not sure if I have sufficient memory of everything, like all the juicy details, at least the ones that I want to talk about when I talk about these books in this video. But we'll see what will happen in this video. So let's start with the first one. This is The Well of Loneliness by Radclyffe Hall. This book was one of those books that I really wanted to read, like from the moment I heard of this book. Okay, from the moment I heard of the title, actually, like The Well of Loneliness. The title is vague and it is dramatic, and if anything, I love books with titles that are vague and dramatic. But sometimes certain books try a little bit too hard in being vague and dramatic. That one, not so much. But this one certainly hit that spot in my heart, and I was already interested in this book. And when I found out that it was classic in lesbian literature, I was like, okay, definitely something I want to read. Yeah, definitely, because I love lesbian literature, even though technically I have not read any lesbian literature at that time. But having the gall to declare that I love lesbian literature without having read any. But as it turns out, this book was awesome. It was a really enjoyable read, and it is sad, but at the same time there is also a bit of that triumph in the story of this novel. So in The Well of Loneliness, we follow a woman named Stephen. Now Stephen lives in the early part of the 20th century, before World War I, and this book follows Stephen from when she was a young girl all the way until she's an adult. And Stephen is British, and she grows up in a fairly affluent family in a British countryside. And as a girl, she discovers that she is kind of different. She has some kind of attraction towards women. And it's just something that happened naturally to her. Like, she was a girl, but then again, she couldn't really understand what was going on with her. Because adults around her couldn't really explain what was going on. But she didn't tell them right away. Like, she just knew that she had some attraction to women. And then at the same time, she also was drawn more towards activities that are usually associated with boys, like writing, like running around outside, something that things that are more physical. But because of these things, her parents are kind of worried about her, and being a child, she could sort of detect those like discomfort that arose from how Stephen sort of strays away from what is considered proper or normal for a girl like her. And so the story goes. We follow Stephen as she grows up into a young woman and eventually into an adult, where she discovers more things about the world and the reality of her existence. She discovers more about falling in love, about forming a relationship, a romantic relationship, and also how the world treats people like her, but also discovers more about herself. So in a way, this book is kind of like a coming-of-age novel. And the story, the plot, culminates into a fairly, I would say, climactic event. Now, I feel like so much of this novel feels quite taut. Like, elements in the plot of this novel, they're very well knitted together. Some of the things that I really like, number one is the references to religion in this novel, like how and by religion I mean Christianity, like how Christianity, like elements of it, and also certain motifs related to the Christianity faith, like the Christian faith, sort of woven into the story. I don't want to tell so much about how it is used, because I think that part is like what I consider to be like really great. But let me just say that there is something that is, some people might consider it sort of blasphemous, but you know me, or maybe you don't, but those kinds of things for me in a book is like très délicieux. But the way that the main character Stephen is sort of portrayed in a quasi-religious light is interesting. And also once in a while the character would kind of invoke religious ideas, and in order to sort of address her existence as a queer individual. But on top of that, there is also how one part that's very interesting is the relationship between this character has with the idea of sacrifice in a religion. Now that is going to be something that is very important for the ending of this book, but it is already being invoked right from the beginning. Like, I think maybe the first or the second or third, like somewhere very much in the beginning of the book, like the idea of self-sacrifice, something that is present in in Jesus, for example, in Christian faith, and the way that this main character just sort of relates to that, it becomes like a part of the novel. So I think that is interesting. This novel also has plenty of mention of nature, which I think is which is quite awesome, especially when it comes to the description of Stephen's home in the countryside, like the idyllic nature, and then her connection with animals. That's also quite interesting. Like, all of those just kind of invoke this, I would say, this very obvious idea when it comes to a queer narrative, which is nature versus nurture kind of kind of direction in storytelling. Like, is queerness related to nature or is it related to nurture? And then here you have a character who is just like so in tune to nature. That's kind of interesting, I think. This book also has some drama if you're drawn towards something like that. To some extent that you might even consider it to be a little bit too dramatic. But for me, it's still fine. Like, it hasn't crossed that line yet. But for some people, probably it would. So, I think that's all I want to talk about The Well of Loneliness. By the way, there may be some sounds outside. I feel like there are some neighbors who are celebrating something. I'm not sure what they're celebrating, but yeah, it's actually kind of late at night, and for me it's kind of fine because I do like a bit of sounds and noise outside at night. But yeah, you might be hearing some sounds from outside, like they're playing music and drums, traditional Indian music. So, which is kind of interesting, because the next book I want to talk about is an Indian novel. This book is called The Aunt Who Wouldn't Die. But before I talk further about this book, let me just check on my light, because I think it is getting dimmer and dimmer. And I'm going to pause this a little bit fast. Okay, I'm back. Right. So, back to book talks. This is The Aunt Who Wouldn't Die. It was written by Shirshendu Mukhopadhyay, and this book was originally written in Bengali, translated to English by Arunava Sinha. Now, when I got this book, I actually thought that it was going to be like a quirky contemporary novel. I mean, just look at this cover. The whole thing just kind of like the color, the choice of the color, the fonts, the design. It feels like, it's going to be really quirky and all that. And I guess to some extent, maybe there is that kind of like supposed quirkiness to it, but I feel like it's a bit more than that. It's a little bit darker than what the quirky cover would suggest. And I was also kind of surprised that this book was actually originally published in 1993. Let me just double check. Yeah, it was originally published in 1993 in the original Bengali, and I thought that this were a recent publication. Again, because of the cover. So yeah, that was like my first impression. But I got it anyway because it's a really slim book, and I read it right away after I bought it. Now, I enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The Aunt Who Wouldn't Die tells the story mainly of one particular woman named Somlata. Now, Somlata comes from a poor family, but she has this fortune of marrying into a fairly rich, or at least relatively richer, aristocratic Bengali family. But at the same time, this aristocratic family is also sort of in decline, because although they have been rich for like decades, the men in that family has never really learned how to work, and because of that, their lifestyle has been very unsustainable. Like by the time Somlata marries into this family pretty much just kind of relies on the sales of their jewels, their golds, and their lands in order to fund their lifestyle, their continuously rich and lavish lifestyle. And it has been kind of a problem that has been noted by some of the women in this family, but because of their kind of position, it was very difficult to sort of make the men in this family to actually work. Now, that is going to kind of clue us in as to how the lives of the women in this family could be like. Now, Somlata is like a new member in this family, and there was one particular member of this family who happened to be someone Somlata considers to be her great aunt in this family. Now this aunt, one day, she dies. Somlata passes her room, and then she discovers that this aunt has died, but somehow mysteriously she heard the voice of the aunt telling her that there's gold in her room, and so she asked Somlata to take the gold and then use it whatever, so that to get some money, because the family is not going to get any richer. And so Somlata, in panic, she just took the gold and then she hid the gold in her room, her own bedroom. But at the same time, she has no plan on using that gold, because otherwise people would discover that she took a gold from a dead woman. But the story sort of starts from there, when the aunt starts to haunt Somlata after her death. So basically, it's kind of like a ghost story of sorts. But the ghost story that this book kind of portrays is not exactly something that is, scary or horror. It is kind of slapstick, kind of funny, in the sense that the aunt, upon her death, after becoming a ghost, is shown to have a completely different voice compared to who she was when she was alive. And we learn about what really happened to this aunt's life when she was alive. Very mild spoiler alert, it was not a good life for her. And when she became a ghost, she became this kind of she had this personality that is really brash and loud, and she would cuss all the time, and she would distract Somlata, making Somlata just kind of unable to focus on doing her house chores, kind of burn the food and kind of disrupt her in a way. And so in this sense, it's kind of interesting, how there's this kind of dynamic that happens between a live person and also a dead person. But what it also tells us about lives of these different women who happen to be of different generation, but yet they have something in common with their lived experiences, despite having these differences in age. Now, there's also actually another part in this book that is written with Somlata's daughter as the focus. Now, that part I didn't really find it super compelling, and that part kind of takes 50% of this book, but at the same time I do think in a way, as part of the concept, it really does complement this whole generational differences of women's experience in that society, what their lives have in common and what differences there are in terms of their experiences as women. So this was a really interesting book. I really like it. yeah, it's kind of like a book that sort of, you know, the main thing I like about it is basically just kind of like how it sort of dances between like different forms of reality. Like, okay, there's a ghost in there. How are we going to take the existence of this ghost as an element in a novel? You know, how to reconcile it with the supposed realism of this novel. So I think that's some really interesting stuff that I kind of enjoyed in this book, and also the ending. If you've read this book, what do you think about the ending? So I'm gonna pause this video for a while because I do feel I'm getting a little bit tired, but I still have one more book. Okay, so the music is still going on outside. I'm not sure how it is going to be, how it is going to show up on this video. But you know, maybe it could act like an interesting background music. So the next book I want to talk about, okay, and I really hope that my memory doesn't run out, is Fang First Love Paradise. Fang First Love Paradise by Taiwanese author Lin Yihan. And this book was originally written in Chinese, translated to English by Jenna Tang. So, this book has been on my radar for quite a while. I went to Taiwan like a few months ago, and then I bought this book when I was there. I was like really happy when I found it because, you know, it was not something that I saw here in Malaysia. I only saw it after I came back, so that was like weird. Anyway, after finishing this book was incredible. This book is incredible, and I find that it's kind of strange that it doesn't really gain like a lot of traction or buzz online or in the you know, around the bookish sphere, because this book is just, for me, this book is interesting and fascinating in so many ways. Both of its history, like especially when it comes to the history of its writer as well, which is kind of tragic, and also the way that this book is written, like the form of it is kind of interesting as well. Now, something about the author is that the author has already passed away, and basically the author committed suicide right very shortly after the publication of the original Chinese edition of this book, which was sometime in 2017, I think. And upon publication, it was kind of like suspected that the content of this book could hint on what may or what might have happened to the author in real life. Now, what exactly is this book about? This book is about the sexual abuse and grooming of one particular young girl in modern Taiwanese society. So basically, this girl, let me check her name because it was like a few months ago. Okay, that was kind of silly. The name of the girl is already here. Okay, so basically the girl's name is Fang, and she has always been really studious. She has a best friend. Both of them are like really academically inclined girls who really want to succeed in their studies. And basically at some point in their academic journey, they are acquainted with a teacher who is who provides them with kind of like extra classes on literature and languages, especially literature. But unfortunately, this teacher is a predator, and he takes an interest with Fang, and basically he uses Fang Siqi's love of literature, uses that as some kind of leverage to get closer to her, and basically just kind of like sexually abuses her. And so this book can be very, very, very difficult to read, especially when it comes to topics such as sexual violence, and especially towards minor. Trigger warning for those who are very uncomfortable with this kind of topic, because not only this book explores that topic, it also explores that topic in ways that are just, that I would describe as really visceral and really raw. Because much of this book is written through the point of view of Fang herself, and so we get to experience like how she's trying to reconcile with this idea of an adult making advances on her, like taking an interest on her, not just like academically, but also in ways that are much more perverse. And how does she try to kind of like perceive that or frame it for herself? Like, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? Well, given the nature of how grooming works, it can really distort one's perception, and that is definitely another thing that we can also see happening with Fang Siqi as a character in here. And the way it is written, it is just very intimate, very personal. You really get inside her head, and there are just so many things that eventually becomes like really messy, but as a third person, as a reader, you can really see how messed up things are in Fang Siqi's head, and how messed up the way that this teacher is behaving towards her. But at the same time, the way that the writing is used to kind of like convey the story is also very interesting, because throughout this novel there is constant references of how literature being used as a tool to kind of like for the teacher to assault Fang Siqi, but at the same time literature is also something that is used as a refuge by Siqi. But because of these really messed up situations, right, and the struggle that Fang Siqi has in trying to understand her situation, you end up with a picture of a young girl just having this really, really, really hard time trying to view her own reality. Now, all of this is happening with people around her not being aware of what's going on. So it gets even harder for her, and also I guess for readers to read that, because you're in her head, but at the same time you're also seeing like what goes on outside. And so there are many things in this book that kind of makes you feel kind of angry as well. So yeah, this book, to me, it is very, very, very powerful. Now, again, something about the writing in this book. This book also features a lot of metaphorical writing, and metaphorical writings are usually intended to be like elegant and beautiful. And what I find interesting about this book is that when it uses metaphorical writing, it usually does so in a way that at first, when it gives you that metaphors, it feels beautiful, right? But somehow there is a second part of that metaphor that kind of feels really perverse, really disgusting. I could count at least 4 times when this book mentions the character Ren, which is kind of like, I'm going to put it in the description box below, the Chinese character Ren, and the shape of it. And basically the shape of Ren is referenced in this book. And in one instance, how this character is used to convey something that is just, really, really off-putting. based on the shape of this character. And mind you, this character is not even something that is like really negative. It's just some very neutral character, meaning person. But I would say that is like one example that really stood out for me. So yeah, and also the ending of this book, there is something that is kind of that feels kind of metafictional or self-referential about it, that makes the origin of this book feel even more, I would say, intriguing as far as what happened to the author goes. Right? I'm not gonna reveal so much on what happened at the back, but there is something that sort of ties somewhat together the story of Fang in this book, and also the person who supposedly wrote this novel, or at least the character who wrote the story of Fang. You know, there is something that is kind of meta going on in there. So, yeah, I would definitely recommend this book because I think it is a very powerful book. For me, it is quite well written. Again, you know, it can be triggering for some individuals, so pay attention to that. But otherwise, yeah, it is a great one. Yep, it is a great book. So I think with that, I'm going to end this video, and I feel like the music has also ended at this time. Yeah, I know the lighting is kind of different this time, but yeah, that's the lighting I'm using in my room right now. But yeah, I only have enough energy for 3 books, so I will see you again in a different video. Let me know if you've read any of these books, and let me know what you are reading at this moment. I will come back with more videos such as this, just to catch up on, you know, my wrapping up. So let's just call it my series of wrap up catch up. I think that name's kind of catchy, right? Anyway, I'll see you then. So yeah, take care, thanks for watching, and bye bye.